last tech talk of the season, right? The third in a three-part series on gradebook stuff. And this was kind of a grab bag. Hey, Sam. Good, we have somebody here. This was going to be gradebook secrets. And the way we were going to do this is each of us, Tom, Nick, Cassy, and me, each had one secret gradebook thing to share. And we're just going to kind of go around the circle, and each of us spend about 5 to 10 minutes sharing our secret. I think that's pretty much it. And also, I think, Tom, you had been selected to go first.
Yay, I win. Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Let's see, go desktop one, share Sherrison. There we go. All right. And you guys come over here, and you guys come here, and you guys come over here. There we go. All right. So this is Canvas course, and it has some grades in it. And my gradebook secret is the gradebook history. So this is honestly one of my favorite things, one of my favorite improvements of all time to the gradebook. There are lots of little things that have helped me as an instructor, and like the drag and drop columns are useful. Sending the total to the front so that's not at the back, that's helpful. But the thing that I think that has made my life easiest, both as an admin and as an instructor, is the gradebook history. So to get to gradebook history, you go here. Let me see here. To the gradebook dropdown in the gradebook, and you select gradebook history. Ta-da! All right, and in here, there's just a table of every change that's been made to any assignment in your gradebook from the dawn of time to present. And so you can kind of go down and like just scroll through to see what happened if you want. But there are also filters across the top. So you can pick your student, like you can start typing and see like what changes look like for test student. There they are. Like, let's just filter by them. Now here are all the test student grades that have been changed. Look at all the zeros. When did those happen? Today, actually. So that's kind of, we'll talk about some other stuff that shows up here in the grid. You can look by, let me go ahead and clear these filters out. Can we? Do I just refresh? There we go. You can sort by grader. So like who graded it? You can take a look at that. What's the artifact name, which is the assignment title? So whatever is being graded, you can view that there as well. And you can also create a date range, like what date were the grade changes made? Like I just want to look at a week's worth of data, for example. So filters, pretty straightforward. But down here, there's date, there's the student name, and then there's the grader. And you'll see right here, we've got grader Tom Gibbons, that's me. Then we got grader not available. Grader not available means that that is the product of an automated process. So an auto-graded quiz, an external tool, applying the set late assignments to 0 automatically. That's what I did here, and just got a bunch of zeros on there. What's that?
I said, oh, that's what you did that last week, where you assign a default grade for everything in this course.
Well, no, I set up the 0. I turned on the 0 today.
Oh,
right. I actually turned on that gradebook setting to apply zeros to late assignments. I did that today. Like that's why you see it. Like, so technically, I am the person who did it, but it's saying not available because it's an automated process. Nobody actually manually entered it, right? And then over here, you will see these before, after, and current columns, which can get a little confusing, right? But like if we look at these two, here's Tom Q. Magoo. Let's see here. And he's down here as well, this week 6. Let's look at Tom Q. Magoo. And let's go ahead and filter him. You can actually see here, week 6 research project. Originally, before any changes were made, it was a dash. Then it was changed to a 0. Current grade is 95. Well, why is that? Well, because it was 0, this changes to 95, the current grade is 95. So if you're looking at the same assignment for the same student, the current column is always going to be the same, should always be the same grade. The before and after columns will change. So you can kind of see before it was a dash, then it was a 0. Now it's a 0, then it's a, or then it was a 0, then it's a 95. Like, so you can kind of trace it back up that way, like kind of a diagonal pathway. But that is the gradebook history. Super useful if you're manually entering grades and you accidentally fat finger a grade in the table and you accidentally overwrite somebody's grades. You can figure that out. It's really useful to be able to see like, oh, did somebody like submit and then resubmit? Oh, okay, that's helpful. So you could see like auto graded things. You can actually see how that's happening and how things are coming in. Like if you have Panopto set up to do auto grading on video quizzes, you'll be able to see that when those things kind of post, you'll also be able to see like exactly how long it takes if you're using Panopto for like grading what percentage of a video somebody watched. You'll be able to see when Panopto dropped that grade in. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, that's the gradebook history. It's really useful to kind of go to if you need to figure out like what happened with these grades. And if you're in a context where you have multiple instructors in a course, you can also see like, hey, wait, what happened? I think we deal with that in professional development maybe a little more frequently than classroom instruction, but classroom instruction, it can be super useful as well. And that is the gradebook history.
Very cool. Okay, I think now it's time for Nick's secret.
Yeah, so I'm spinning off of that. My secret is actually dealing with grading schemes, which we've talked about before, and they're kind of a complex thing. But for those that don't know, a grading scheme is essentially how you can, instead of assigning a point value, assign like a letter grade or something a little bit more complex. Like, for example, to the left here, this assignment is using the complete or incomplete, we'll call it grading style in the actual assignment. But with the addition or the, I'll call it the change canvas made a while back to allow you to put custom grading schemes on individual assignments, you can essentially set what a 1 means versus a 2 versus a so on and so forth. So I'll show you what that does and how you can kind of think through that. So for those that have used grading schemes before, in the past, you've had to go to settings and enable them there. And when you enable that grading scheme, or basically allow for some sort of different visual to pop up with a point value, it would also affect your total grade. Well, now if I jump into an assignment, I'll use this one as the example. I click edit, and under my display grade as, when I select letter grade, I can create a new grading scheme here that is specific to that assignment. So for example, this is the one I made earlier. If I view it, basically what happens is if the student gets 100%, it's complete. If it's anything between 1% and 99%, so assuming maybe I had a 3-point rubric, which had its own criteria, or I'm doing specs grading and I have some or labor-based or something that requires a lot of resubmission, I can put this language to go in with any point value, and maybe my goal is for them to complete and get to that point. So it aligns with my instructions for the assignment and how I've kind of talked about labor or work in my syllabus. So the idea here is maybe it's another layer of transparency. Maybe it adds some language that aligns better with your course that maybe the complete or incomplete value, like you saw in the example to the left of it in the grade book, doesn't do, which only gives you kind of 2 options. You either got it all or you didn't get it all. This might give you a little bit more wiggle room. But what I can do, for example, is I can create a new one if I want to. And what it's going to do is give me a default. Now, this is one of, I don't know why, but this is a window that I cannot expand.
Slightly annoying.
But what I typically do is I try to think through how many ranges do I want. So say I've got a rubric that I want to align this to. I figure out how many potential options I have and what categories those are, make sure that's in my assignment instructions, and then I might start messing around in here. One of the cool things though too is, say I've got a writing assignment that is going to help me categorize students maybe in an on-ground class, like break them up into groups the following day or after the submission. I could kind of do that in here, assuming that this assignment is in an ungraded assignment group, like 0% of total grade. I could kind of create an opportunity for me to align, like student groups to whatever they do. So let's say this is group 1, and the point values in this case are arbitrary. So that's why I feel, comfortable doing this kind of as a one-off. It's not something that's gonna be consistent, but it's something that I'm gonna be using for some sort of in-class activity. And then as I'm grading in Speed Grader, let me make sure I get my percentages correct. I can give them a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, something that aligns with these percentage groups. Actually, let's make it points. For example, 1, a 2, a 3, or 4. Obviously, it takes off my things, but let's do it this way. Back to group 1 and so on. But I could use that to help me as I'm grading and potentially help me manage this interaction the next day. Save that, save the assignment, look in the grade book, and this is what the students will see aligned with their grade. Now, on the student end, they will see group 2 and whatever the point value is, but the group is kind of what comes through as important, but also as a tool for yourself. Again, assuming that's an ungraded assignment group, you can use something that's a little less, I guess, typical for a one-off, but that's kind of the benefit of at the assignment level, and it shows up at the gradebook. So that's my little gradebook hack.
Well, and I like it for like, if you want to do complete, incomplete, complete plus kind of thing, where
Absolutely.
if a student goes above and beyond and you want to recognize that in some way with the grade, it may not directly impact their grade value, but you could use a scheme like this to kind of give them that little plus, that little extra star on it.
And the thing I would always say is, regardless of what you do in here, this is atypical. A student does not expect or has not been cultured to kind of understand whatever this system is. So it requires another layer of transparency.
Transparency is key.
This writing assignment is how I'm going to break you up into groups. You will see what group you are in as I grade you. It doesn't affect your total grade, but will help us with the activity tomorrow. Or even, complete plus. What does that mean? Yeah, you got to describe that in the assignment instructions.
Very cool.
But yeah, easy peasy.
I like it. Okay, Cassie, what's your secret?
All right, let me share my screen. So my secret's been shared approximately 452 times in the last 2 weeks. But we're gonna do it again. All right, so I'm in Gradebook. Mine is the automatically apply grade for missing submissions. We're gonna kind of talk through a little bit about some things that can go right and wrong with it. So I'm in Gradebook. I'm clicking on the gear here, and it's this one right here, automatically apply grade for missing submissions. I like to call this zeros across the board because I'm mean. But you can click on that and you can determine your grade for missing submissions. And it's a percentage. So the reason I call this zero across the board is because I would only ever use 0, just me as an instructor. I've only ever used 0 for missing submissions, because if you don't turn something in, I can't rate it, and it's 0. So essentially, once a due date has passed, students who didn't turn it in will automatically get whatever you put in there on that assignment. So in this case, a 0. Why you would do this? So a 0 is calculated into a student's grade, reflects the reality of their grade more closely than an ungraded assignment. So if you're not keeping up with your grades, I've had this happen here and with, in my own teaching, students might not realize that they have a bunch of missing assignments. I mean, Canvas has lots of different ways of telling you that you haven't done an assignment, but students oftentimes are thinking about, what's my grade look like? So they might not realize that until and then you go back in later and you add those zeros. And we've seen this happen a couple of times. And then we'll watch a student's grade just tank suddenly because, when you do math, you add 0 to something and then average it out, you have essentially tanked their grade. So for instructors who, aren't keeping up with their grading, They do it all at the end, or maybe they kind of batch grade at a certain point in the course. Disasters, disasters, disasters. So this is really a how to avoid disaster situation. A couple of things to think about before you use this feature. All of your assignments need to have due dates in order for you to actually be like doing this properly. So if you don't have due dates, Canvas can't really tell you that the submission is past due.
Right.
So another great reason to have due dates for all of your assignments.
One of many.
One of many, but this is a good one. What your students will see essentially, they're going to see zeros if you put a 0 in here. Yay, I think. This can be great. So your mileage is going to vary. This can be great because students will, oh, I sound like a monster. Students will kind of freak out when they see a 0. And by that, I mean, it will trigger a response, which can actually be a good thing for a student to keep up with their grade. We're talking about transparency. We're also talking about giving students the agency to know, when they haven't done something. So, a student may have not turned something in. They kind of forget about it, but then they see a 0 in there because they're looking through their grades and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't turn that in. And panic is not the word. We're just going to use respond. They respond in some way. And this can be a really great thing because it gives students, hopefully, depending on who you are as an instructor, it gives students the opportunity to reach back out to you, or the impetus to reach back out to you. So if you're going to use this, I have a section in my brain and on this piece of paper here called Using Your New Powers for Good Stimulus Response. Thank you, Tom. So if you're going to do this, I want you to think about some things before you do it. Make sure you have due dates, obviously. If you have firm due dates to things, like students can't turn things in late, you're going to need to use available until in the assignment itself, and make it be the same as the due date. Otherwise, students are going to kind of, you're giving too much wiggle room for them. But if you can be really firm about this, students won't be able to turn things in late. The 0's the 0's the 0, end of story. Make sure that you've told your students that you've done this. They need to know that if you don't turn it in by this time, it's going to show up as a 0. This is kind of not the time to be all flexy. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, so on the subject of due dates, just as a due and until thing, just from having had to have this discussion way too many times, I almost always set the due date at a particular date and time. And then I set the available until date for like 5, 10, or 15 minutes later. Because so much of what, like I've had that conversation so many times where a student's like, I tried to submit and I submitted it on time and it didn't go in. It's like, I don't want to have that conversation anymore. So I'm going to use the robots to have that conversation for me. So if it didn't go in, you were 15 minutes late at least. Because like, honestly, I don't care. Like you're 15 minutes late. Like, so like, did you really get the go from F to A on that? I don't know. But yeah, that's just a thing that I would recommend, is like giving a little bit of a buffer because people's clocks are different, if nothing else.
Monsters. You're much nicer than I am. But the one thing that I really want to say, like if you were going to do this, also make sure that the student has some way to communicate with you when they see that 0 and that 0 is the stimulus and they have a response. Give them a possible response.
Gotcha, yeah.
Is that response going to be, if you have a 0, here's what you can do. Perhaps they might have an opportunity to redo it for fewer points. Do they need an extension? Maybe, they're going to ask for an extension after the fact. Oh, well, not ideal, but can you give that to them? Great time to use the assign to feature. Do you have a late submission deduction going on, which we're going to talk about next? Tell them. So like I said, if you're going to do this, you need to let your students know that you're going to do this. This isn't a substitute for keeping up with your grades. It's just not. But it is one way that you can prevent students from having a really nasty surprise at the end of the quarter when you go back in and you take all of those dashes and make them 0s. Oh, I don't want that. It's a nudge. It's a nudge. All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
It's Caleb's turn.
It is mine.
Bring us home.
And mine is a short one and also a weird one. But I actually learned this just earlier this week and I was like, oh, that's so weird. I kind of love it. Okay, let me share my screen. We'll do this right here. Tom has graciously agreed to let me use his demo course for this because his is already populated with a bunch of pretend students with a bunch of pretend assignments and pretend grades. So I'm in the class, I go into grades, and as usual, the students in my class are doing their work. They have, some of them have good grades, some of them have bad grades, they all have work. But that damn test student is just the worst student I've ever had. It's always got a 0. I just wish I could get through the test student. But here's my secret. You can get rid of test student in your class if you want to. And it would no longer show up in your gradebook. So I'll show you how this works and how to do it, what happens, and then also why it's not permanent. But if I go back to my course home and I go to settings and I go to sections and then I go to the class section, usually there would just be one here, but there might be more than one if it's a merged class or something like that. But if I go to this, it'll show me all the students enrolled in the class. And Tom, if I remember correctly, instructors cannot remove real students who are enrolled in the class via CTC link. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is not one of those classes, obviously, like with those student names. Yeah, but yeah.
But what I'm looking for is test student, and test student is always going to be in here, and you can remove test student. Now, if I do that, and I go back to the home, and I go back to grades, test student is gone, and I no longer have to see it in here. Now, personally, test student does not bother me, but I know that test student bothers some instructors. And if test student bothers you, you can get rid of it. Now, here's the thing about test student. We also have this view as student button in Canvas, which is an extremely useful tool for double checking that things are appearing in the way that you want them to appear. Now, I just got rid of test student in this class, but if I at any point view a student in this class again, that's going to automatically recreate and re-enroll test student into this class. So I've done that. I'm looking at it at the class as test student. I leave student view. And now if I go back into grades, test student is back. But if test student really gets under your skin for aesthetic reasons, you can get rid of it. And that is my secret. That's it. Okay, I need to stop sharing. Okay, we got through 4 pretty interesting, cool.
Shared our
Gradebook.
secrets. You know everything now.
That's all we know about the gradebook.
We have nothing left to give.
I do want to link in one other just ridiculous thing that I'm kind of dealing with the late policy. So an instructor imported their course, had the late policy in place in their source course, imported it in, and their course, and when they imported it in, they didn't roll the dates forward on everything, and so the course automatically assigned late zeros to every student who was enrolled in the class, even though the course wasn't published, hadn't started. It was just like, and so he went through and manually fixed that. And now apply zeros to late assignments, to missing assignments, does not function in that course because it only triggers once per assignment per course. And so it doesn't matter that he changed the due dates. It doesn't matter that like you can unapply, you can remove and reapply the rule. Doesn't do a blessed thing. So I'm trying to help him figure out what's going on because Canvas support is like, yeah, you changed all those grades. Like, and it looks like your students resubmitted. It's like, well, no, they actually submitted, right? And they hadn't submitted at all before. It's just the robots assigned zeros on course import. So if you're using that, it's important to turn it off in your source course before you import to your target course for the next term, or apply the date rollover on import so that it is like not doing that. It's a little, that date rollover thing is a little tricky. Like it doesn't, like I cannot get it to work for the life of me. I don't know what I'm calendar impaired in a really big way. Like calendars and time, like I have real difficulty with those. I literally have links to like time code translators in my browser because I'm like, I don't know. The most I can do is Pacific to Central. Like that's it. That's all I got. But yeah, it is it's tricky. Like it's super useful, and I believe in the apply zero to missing assignment strategy in a big way because I've seen it work for my students. But Canvas has made it a little bit harder to use lately.
Usually my preference when I'm rolling over a class is to remove all due dates when I do that import. And then, because I also struggle with the shift due dates. I never feel like I do it right. So personally, I prefer to remove all due dates, and then in the assignments, I can bulk edit the dates there and ensure that they are getting the dates that I really want them to have.
Yeah, my preference is to leave the dates on and then go into the bulk edit and select everything and say, advance this 150 days.
Mm.
Oh,
And so that it just like perfectly goes, okay, the first day of the class is this, and here it is. And it just moves everything. Just it's this class started 150 days after the last time I started this course. But you can't do that anymore with that weird thing. If you have zeros, it applies zeros turned on.
Good to know. Okay, well, we are out of time. And that was the last Tech Talk of the spring quarter. So if we don't see you again on Zoom or anything, have a great rest of your quarter. We are always around all summer long. We are on 12-month contracts, and we will return in the fall with another series of Tech Talks. Thanks, everybody. All right, I'm ending the stream.
Bye,
Okay.
live stream. Sorry.
My stream is ended.